Hey everyone, I'm Ray. I'm the head of marketing over here at Freshpaint. And I'm joined today by Mapolo Buessing, who is a Freshpaint customer. Hey Mapolo, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Doing good, man. Mapolo, would you mind, just for the folks who are viewing, can you just give us a quick intro and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Mapolo. I'm director of product at Charlie Health. I've been in product management probably for 8 or 9 years now. Worked at several health tech companies and startups. And yeah, I love analytics.
That's awesome. Just for fun, to make it personal, obviously you obsess over product marketing for work. You've been doing that for a while. What's something you obsess over when you're not working?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things right now. It's wrestling. I coach high school wrestling, and yeah, we had a super exciting match last night. It ended up tie, and there was a bunch of like tie breaking criteria, and we went on like the ninth criteria. So it was a really exciting match, and just love working with the kids and seeing them grow as human beings.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about, and you've been doing this for a while as a product manager. Can you just walk us through a little bit about how you got started?
Yeah, so I actually used to be a civil engineer. I worked on hospitals and structures, and I had a friend who worked at a startup as a project manager. He told me I'd be good at it, and so I switched over and became a project manager. I did that for like 3 or 4 years. Really got my feet wet in the space, like understanding how software is built, developed, learn a bunch of different things. I really felt like I could move into product management. So, I've convinced our team at Location Labs that I could be a product manager. And so they gave me a shot at it. And when I first started, I had like nothing. Like I didn't really have a team at all. I just happened to be there for a long time. I knew people. And so I was in charge of this product that in my mind was kind of like a product that everyone was ignoring. And so yeah, the nice thing about not having a team is like I didn't have to like feed them work, and I had a lot of time to just like think about my product and my problem. So one of the things I did was I was trying to figure out like how folks signed up for our product. And we had a stream of sign up, but like we didn't really know where they were coming from. And I thought like, well, the biggest impact I could make is just figuring out how people sign up. And if I could drive a little improvement there, that would be a huge win. People might notice. So essentially bribed one of our engineers who I was kind of managing another project on, and I asked him to introduce a little snippet on our kind of sign up landing page to capture where folks were coming from. So this is like the URL that they were coming from. And so our product was a white label product with one of the major cell phone carriers. And so I ended up getting this massive list of like all these URLs from this carrier. And then I found, through the product analytics that I think like 40 or 50% of our impressions on that web page were coming from this one URL. But compared to all the other like URLs, its conversion was way less. It was like 5%, and everyone else was like 30 or 40%. So I was like, this is like really odd. So found that link, and I saw on that page that we had like their page had a really strong value prop. Like, hey, this is what this is going to solve. And then when you clicked on that link, it just got dropped and you got asked to pay for the product, and you didn't know what the product was. And so, yeah, I got a designer. We built like a very simple 3-screen carousel that they would hit before they were asked to pay. And that conversion went up higher than even like the other channels. And so because of the way all the math worked out, I boosted signups for a product with by 50% with just like, I don't know, a few hours or a few days of development time. And so yeah, it was a lot of work, but without those analytics, I would have been nowhere. And so that kind of put me on that path to like find out that solution. And one thing that was fun after that, it seemed like I got noticed within the product team. Our head of product actually made all the other PMs build out journeys for their product. So so that was fun. But yeah, then they put me in charge of, bigger and more important products after that.
I love that story for two reasons. One, it's a great example of like, without the analytics, you wouldn't have known where to look for, to find the problem. And without the analytics, you wouldn't have been able to measure, like, if like saliently, it's a great thesis, like, let's just create a better experience. But like, if you're not able to measure the result, you just would never be able to tell that story. I've been at a lot of startups, and one of the things I see is the work is always there to be done. And there's always an opportunity to dig in and improve things. But sometimes people are reluctant to do that because they feel like they don't have the authority. Like, their job isn't like that, they're not tapped to go solve this problem, so they don't. Like, what would you recommend to like PMs who are starting out early? How would you coach them on like, having that courage to go try to figure it out?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you coach someone. I would say it's kind of courageous, right? Because it's like it's not safe, right? You can kind of, go through the motions. Oh, I'm just doing my sprint planning thing. But, I would say follow your gut. If you have a hunch, like, go and pursue it. And maybe nothing comes of it. Like, in this last example was a good example of something great coming out of a hunch and me spending off, some of my time to pursue it. But then there's like 10 other times where I've done that and it's resulted in nothing. And so, yeah, I would say go for it. Try to carve up some time. I think often as a PM, you're getting peppered from all different directions on what's important or what you should be doing. And it always feels like you have a laundry list that is never getting done. And I would just encourage everyone to carve off some time to be like, hey, what do I want to do? Or what do I think is really important? Even if it's just like 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, just to go down those paths.
Yeah, I love that. Almost a framework, like you have to give yourself some time to have this thinking time to explore, just call it experimentation time. And then you're going to be better off if there's analytics, so that you can actually like use analytics to find the sore spot and use analytics to measure if there was a result.
Yeah, the analytics in this case, it was like, it showed me where to look. And then I looked, and then like, and then it comes like, okay, this isn't a good experience. How do I make it a better experience? But like, the analytics paired with the user research, paired with the design, an understanding of your customers, that's what kind of ties it all together. And then at the end of the day, when you're done, you can just show them a cool graph that says, look what happened. It went up 50%, and no one can argue with you.
That's right. So after that, you've gone on and continued this, career in products. I think you've had, this is going to be like Charlie's your 5th company now. When you start a new role, like I think you've fairly recently moved over to Charlie. How do you approach that? What's your framework to approaching the new role?
Yeah, so the first thing I do is try to orient myself around the customer, user, the people that are buying our product. And so what that typically looks like is I'll shadow, if you have a sales team, I'm shadowing sales calls just to see what their conversations are like. If you want to know how your product works or how your customers perceive your product, go on a sales call, because the folks that are demoing are going to be demoing the things that customers care about. And so I'd always start there. I'd also talk with customer success. If your product has like an onboarding experience, shadow those onboarding calls. And then the third thing is see what people are doing in your product. So I always lean on analytics. So I've done that. I've talked to customers. I've seen what they've been doing. I've seen sales, but then I also want to kind of pair that and validate that with some analytics. So, hey, what are we demoing the right things or not? So if I'm watching a demo and they're demoing like a certain piece of the product, my mind is like, oh, that's really important. But then if I go and look at the analytics and no one is using that, then I can come back and be like, hey, I don't know if that is important. Maybe it's a cool sales tactic or feature, but I don't need to invest time in that side of the product. So I try to pair like talking with customers with seeing how they actually use the product, because sometimes those things are not aligned, and there's a lot of interesting questions or things you want to dive into there.
What are because that's a conversation that, because sometimes early stage companies think about, and it is super important, like as a head of marketing, one of my superpowers is spending time with customers. Like I don't need to invent anything if I can actually understand like how they're talking about those problems. But so a lot of companies then skip the quantitative part. They think it's too early and I can just rely on customer interviews. How are they different sometimes? Like, what are some examples for you of like, qualitative customer interviews versus like the quantitative product analytics data set?
Yeah, so one thing that quantitative is not going to get you is like customer motivation. So, what, like they say, hey, that's important. I really needed to do this. And then, your data can like show that it is really important because you see lots of users using it, but then, why it's important, you don't necessarily know. So how you should message that feature, or how you should message that button, how you should drive engagement with that feature is really driven by that motivation for why the customer wants to do it. So I don't know, the classic like product example is, the drill in the hole. What a customer needs is like a 1-inch hole, and they purchase a drill to drill the 1-inch hole, right? It's not that's really their motivation for purchasing the drill. Yeah, so on the analytics side though, the data is unbiased, and so when you look at the analytics, that's like what your users are doing, and you can see those trends in an unbiased manner. Any type of like qualitative data has a bunch of biases in it. The method that you're performing a survey, or the way you talk to customers, or the customers you choose to talk to, there's a lot of bias in there. But if you can look at the raw data, it's super helpful in removing those biases. I think there's a lot of like tactical things that analytics solve better than talking to people. So if you want to know what devices your customer base is using, like you can ask hundreds of customers, or you could just look at a dashboard and get a very exact answer to the question, and that might inform like what your device support looks like. Another example is funnels. So you can watch someone going through a funnel and see where they may struggle, but then you can also pair that with like a quantitative analysis of like, hey, this is the spot in our process or in our sign up funnel where folks are falling down, and then you can focus your design efforts, your user research on those areas, as opposed to places where people are kind of gliding through.
Yeah, like in some ways the product analytic can just show you right away where the drop off is in the funnel, and then session replays and customer interviews can help you understand like why are they dropping off there, what's happening there, and then you kind of have some ways to kind of de-risk your roadmap and prioritize going forward.
Yeah.
So we both agree that like both are important. Like you need to be, we're always searching for the why do people care. That's a big part of like who I am. Like, why are we building this? Why is this going to help our customers? But we also want to know, like, we want that analytics piece too, to have a checks and balance. What advice, since you've been through this before, what advice would you give to the PMs that are on this call? What advice would you give to them if they're struggling to get their management on board?
Yeah, so I've dealt with different ends of the spectrum on this. Like some places I've gone into have been like, hey, yeah, we need product analytics. And that's usually because someone up in leadership has had that in the past and seen the value of it. So it's not a hard conversation, but there's definitely places, especially early stage, or, founders that maybe haven't had a ton of experience at other startups or other other companies, and they may not really understand the value of analytics, or maybe they think what they have now is good enough. So my recommendation would be always start at the top and figure out what the leadership team cares about. So the one practical tip that I would give that's worked out really well for me is I just ask all the, like when I'm thinking about, hey, I need to roll out analytics, I ask all the leadership teams or all the stakeholders to write out all the questions they have about our customers. And it's very easy for them. It takes them 5 minutes. They come up with a huge laundry list of questions. And then I'll just bucket them. There's usually like some very common themes that come up. And I can say, hey, okay, I'm going to answer these questions with some product analytics. And that's how I kind of pitch it to the team. And then that'll actually feed into when I start rolling out analytics across the organization.
So almost like, because everyone will have like a set of really strong questions. And basically you're saying in some case, if analytics isn't there, a lot of those questions are going to be very difficult to answer for people. And so the next step for you to answer them, which there is an appetite to get those questions answered, is let's get some baseline of analytics in place so I can come back to you with results.
Yeah, and most small startups, when they don't have that in place, it's like everyone has a different opinion about the answer to all those questions based on their own experience. And that's where like an unbiased data set can kind of guide folks or unify folks around what the actual answer to that question is.
Is that how that conversation, like you're in the room with all the executives, maybe the founders of the startup, is that how that conversation goes? Like, is it everyone has their opinion to these questions? And do you call out that like, we actually don't have a way to measure that quantitatively? So it'd be helpful for us to like pair those opinions with that actual result. Is that exactly how the conversation goes for you?
Yeah, I mean, usually it comes in the form of like you're talking about a roadmap or prioritization. And so it's like, hey, I'm trying to prioritize this project or initiative or at the company or this feature. And so you're weighing different features, and then each team, sales is going to have one take on this is the most important feature. Customer success is going to be like, hey, this is causing the most tickets, and and everyone, there's like that tension of like which thing do we weight the most, and having an unbiased analytics take that you can use, you're still always going to have that, but maybe you have this other party in the room that can help squelch some of the tension or unify folks around an idea or data. So yeah, that's how it usually forms.
That's cool. I know the early success story of like, juicing signups by 50%. Is there another time that you can think of more recently where you had, you weren't able to answer a question, but analytics actually helped you like answer it, and it had a big impact? Like, can you think of any other time?
Yeah. So, if you work at startup, board meetings are always a thing. And so like every 3 months or 6 months, if you're like leading a product team, or you'll just, sometimes the CEO will just Slack you and they'll just ask you random questions, and you don't really know the context, but it's for like a board meeting and they're going to present it at this board meeting or something, or they're trying to dive into or answer some question that some board member had. So yeah, there was one situation at Osmind where we were trying to figure out, we had this kind of feature that we had piloted, and we were trying to figure out some information about engagement, and we didn't really have it well tracked at the time. And so it either required like an engineer to go look in a database and write some queries. And so the CEO asked me to investigate. I went in, I used Freshpaint to just basically auto track the button click. And it's not going to be a precise answer about exactly how many times someone interacted with the feature, but I could very, very easily show like, hey, this is like in the ballpark of how many times, this is how it's been growing month over month, and show a graph, and then you're off and running. So really quickly, in that case, it's amazing because I don't need to talk to engineering. I don't need to go through a cycle of sprints to get something implemented. I could get an answer to her right away, and have high confidence that data is good.
What was, yeah, I mean, that like our CEOs, like whenever we can, like they're on the spot sometimes trying to like answer a question, right? That's really what this is about. And it can be reactive. What was the outcome there? Like, how did that impact your relationship with the CEO being able to like get that answer that she needed?
Yeah, so I think it builds trust, and so much in software is developing trust with your teams, executives, leadership. Ultimately, like if as you're trying to grow in your career, one way to grow is be an asset for your manager, for your boss. If you can prove that you can deliver on things, they'll come back to you more and more. Yeah, I think there's often a perception that managers need to manage you, but often, it's on you to kind of manage up, know what they need, know what they want, provide that, and that's what'll help grow you in your career and get promoted.
Yeah, it's really credibility and trust are so key because you need that buy-in you also need that buy-in to get the time you need to figure things out, right? A lot of this is trial and error and experimentation. I love that. You've built a couple teams now on the product side. So you move from like self-starter, product manager, and now you're leading product teams. When you're thinking about scaling your team and building that team of PMs, how do you think about your team as it relates to analytics? Like, what do you look for? What do you look for in your team?
Yeah, so on the product side, I think there's so many. It's a very like broad skill set. I think that you need to be a successful product manager. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to communicate with design, understand funnels, understand the business and what's important and lifetime value, yada, yada, yada. And then, but on the analytics side, when you're in the day-to-day and the weeds of like trying to build a product, the things that I'm looking for in analytics is like, do you understand a funnel? Do you understand what retention is and why that's important for the business? Do you understand what drives retention? So when I'm doing an interview and I'm diving into a question, like I want to hear folks talk about, oh yeah, we implemented this thing, we saw higher engagement, and then ultimately that helped drive retention on our product. Or, we made this change to improve this funnel and improve engagement in the product. And so I'm looking for, that story of building something, of creating something, but also an analysis that comes with it and like capturing those success metrics.
Love that.
And using that through analytics. Yeah.
Where like for me, like I've been doing startups for a long time, and I feel like I'm constantly learning new things. I don't have all the answers, and I don't even have a playbook, right? Just some frameworks and a bunch of tactics, because it changes constantly.
Yeah.
I imagine like, newer PMs, it's a fire hose. There's a lot to learn, right? So where do you direct your team to try to like continue their learning?
Yeah. So for product analytics, it's been around for a while now, and it's been a growing field. So, there's like so much content out there, so much great content out there. So the places that I usually direct people is Mixpanel has a great retention playbook, and it was one of the first things I read. It's long, but it's super detailed, and I think it covers like a ton of what you need to know in terms of analytics. You can really dive in. Beautiful illustrations, well written. It's free. It just costs you your email address and marketing from Amplitude. Sorry, it's Amplitude, I should say.
Amplitude, yeah.
Amplitude, yeah, mastering retention. I also recently took, and this is a plug for the old product school. They didn't pay me anything for this,
Okay.
but I recently took their mixed panel course, and that was super useful for myself. I hadn't used mixed panel for a while, and I had got to learn and build out charts and learn about a bunch of new functionality that I didn't know about. So there's great tools out there. Just Google them, but those are two that, like, hey, if you want hands-on experience, check out that mixed panel product school class. I think you can get a certificate. It takes a couple hours, and then check out Mastering Retention by Amplitude.
Those are awesome tips, and nice plug for everyone here who's part of product school already. So it should be something they can access. I guess the last question we have is like specifically around, implementing analytics. I've actually spent the last couple of months having 100+ discovery calls with product leaders around like some of the challenges that they've had. And it's difficult to get like this buy-in. It's difficult to like prop up analytics. It's difficult to like get buy-in from engineering to create new events. Like what are some tips and tricks that you can share about that?
Yeah, so I would always start small. I talked earlier about creating, like, getting all the questions out there from all the stakeholders. Yeah. And when you look at all those questions, you can probably answer them with a handful of events. I think actually mixed panel in their onboarding, they basically ask you to implement, I think it's 1 or 2 events, and then they build like this beautiful dashboard for you. And I think it's to get at this point of like, hey, you want to, with the smallest amount of work, you want to show that this is something valuable. And so, yeah, so like I would start really small, think about those questions, and then plan out how you're gonna implement those few events in the minimum amount of time possible. Share those out. So as soon as you get them, as soon as you start seeing those data, share them out. Like once I implement mixed panel, I'm like, the next week is like marketing. I'm just like, here, look at this chart, look at this chart. I'm just getting everyone to see, what's out there in the org. And that really, then it kind of feeds itself. People will ask questions and you'll be like, yeah, I can do that. Let me implement another event on there. And there's also, one thing that I love about Freshpaint is they have this auto tracking feature, and they also have this historical playback. So one of the things is, when you can implement very cheaply and get a baseline of everything. And that was super valuable, because instead of going your team, be like, hey, we're gonna have to spend a sprint and implement a bunch of analytics, you can say, hey, I have a story, it can be done in like an hour, put it on there, and then I can give some baseline. And so your upfront investment is small, and you can get at least a baseline of analytics. You can very quickly get a lot of information that is valuable at low cost.
Do you mind if I share a visual with everyone who's tuned in? Because I think this visual helps kind of illustrate a little bit about what you talked about.
Yeah, sure.
So let me share my screen here with everybody. So this is, could you talk to this a little bit, Mapolo? Just for everyone all the PMs out there who are watching this, basically like what Mapolo is saying is the conventional way of implementing event tracking. There's a process, like you have a process here, and it takes time. Conservatively a month. Some will peg it at much longer than a month. Can you just talk through this visual, like what you see here?
Yeah, so usually like you'll be doing some research or something, and you're like, oh, I wonder how many people click on this button, or like navigate to this page and then navigate to this page. So you'll then go and like write a doc and say, hey, I want to track this event, and you define the event and you say what properties you want, you write up that ticket, and then you put it in the backlog and try to get it prioritized in an upcoming sprint, right? And then engineer picks it up, they ask some questions, or like, oh, it's hard to do this way. You go back and forth, you fill it in, and then finally they implement the event. You wait for it to get released, and then you wait for the data to populate, and then you have your answer. And it's like 4, 5, 6 weeks since you wanted that answer. And so you've lost all that time, and you don't have an answer to your question. And so you'll just do that over and over again. And it's good to still do that over time, but sometimes you just need an answer right away.
What's the impact to you as a PM when you have to wait? Like I mean, it's probably obvious, but I just want to hear it in your own words. Like when you have to wait a month or more to get an answer to a question, like why do you care? Why do you want to move faster?
Yeah, it means that like I'm working on a project and I either have to move forward with like less confidence, higher risks, less information, or I say, hey, well, we're gonna hold and wait for this thing, and then I find something out, and I'm like, dang, I wish I did that 4 weeks ago. I would have like prioritized this higher, and so the impact is really just like in speed and understanding. And if you don't have those things in startup world, that stuff matters. And in a month, your team could totally shift priorities, and you've lost the opportunity to work on something that you might think is really important.
Yeah. And I think it's probably worth just showing quickly for everyone here, like what you were talking about, that process that could take a month or more versus I just want to get the answer, now, like I want to run that analysis in Mixpanel right away. So Mapolo, I know you use Freshpaint. We're running Freshpaint, the product on Freshpaint, our website. So I'm just going to like illustrate to everybody here what that looks like. Yeah. And this is what you meant, right? Like maybe I'm building a funnel here. And for us, we need to have conversations about how Freshpaint works. So we have a sales-led go-to-market strategy. And getting a demo clicks is a super important one, just as a point of illustration. So as Mapolo said, instead of submitting this ticket to engineering to code this button click into the code base, we can just do it right now. So we'll just call it product school demo click, and I'm going to limit it to the home page. So we know that action on that button click is related to the home page. And then I'm just going to save that event to Freshpaint. And immediately, there's no wait here. We can go into the library and search for that action that we just set up. And we even capture a screenshot here so you can see what that event means, because sometimes people are like, what does this mean? What event is Mapolo tracking here? Or Mapolo's not sure. You can know because we capture the screenshot and highlight the button. And the example here is like, we've got a couple of these events. We'll just repeat that process to add them. And we can actually then push that to Mixpanel with one click. And the second part, as Mapolo highlighted, is you want to run the analysis today. You don't want to wait another 2 weeks for data to populate. So you can immediately backfill that data. We hold up to about 12 months worth of previous data because we've been tracking this event in the background, or you can just limit it to a period. And so now that event is going downstream to Mixpanel, where Mapolo or other PMs could jump in and basically like build that funnel or build that insights report and get your answer today. So that's what you were talking about, right? Like
yeah,
the month journey, and everyone we just did that so you could just see what we're talking about. But that was minutes. Like if I have to set up maybe 5 or 6 events, okay, maybe it takes me a half an hour to plan it out, go in and configure it. But like, that's an answer I'm getting today as opposed to a month.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great example. I mean, funnels are always easy examples in my opinion, but like you book a demo, and if you want to answer the question like, hey, what percentage of people click book a demo and then actually submit their information to book a demo, that's 2 events. You can quickly send that event. You can see how long it takes between those events. You can see what percentage of folks drop off, what percentages don't, which ones complete it, what browsers are on, all that. You can get that instantly in like 30 minutes. So it's like it's a huge win. And I love auto tracking for that reason. A quick, rough, dirty, relatively reliable. You can make a decision based on that data. There's always going to be a need for precision events. Like, for example, let's say you send out an appointment text confirmation. That event is maybe sent from the back end. You're going to have to fire a precision event for that. It's not like a button click on your website. And if someone responds and says, hey, yeah, I'm confirmed for that appointment, that's another precision event that you'd fire from the back end. So it's a combination of the precision and auto tracking, but there's so many times where you just need an answer like now, and that's when auto tracking is so useful.
Yeah, you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask you the question around the elephant in the room is the misnomer with auto track is that, yeah, auto track is not helpful because it doesn't solve all those precision events. And both of us share the same worldview with like, yeah, that's the wrong way to look at it. Like no one's saying that auto track solves everything. That's why companies like Freshpaint take a hybrid approach where we can auto track so you can move quickly, but then we have the ability to set up those server side events. So you have the best of both worlds. And over time, as your data set matures, right, you may capture more events precision track, but you're always going to iterate. You're always going to launch products. You're always going to make changes. And that's where the benefit of auto track comes in, because you can actually like get that feedback loop very, very quickly. So you know exactly what's working. And maybe when something's working, then you want to solidify the data set around that, and you have the flexibility there.
Yeah, 100%. For so many of just the quick, simple product questions and answers, auto tracking is great. I think one things that a lot of PMs do, or I think a lot of folks in general, is they over-index on the quality of the data or getting the exact answer. So most of your decisions, like you're not necessarily going to have like all the statistical significance, or you don't need data that's like 100% accurate all the time. If you knew it was 90% accurate, you could make the same decision, right? So I often found that we over-index, we spend 90% of our time trying to make that 10% of the data perfect, when really, we can just make a decision on the 90%. And so, yeah, auto tracking is something that allows you to do that.
That's huge. Well, I've really enjoyed the convo. I really appreciate you investing some time. I think I learned a lot from you, and I think everybody else here did as well. So thank you, Mapolo. Always appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Ray.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.